The forest was silent, not because it was empty, but because every tree seemed to scream. A merchant crossing the southern border of Wallachia in the year 1460 found himself surrounded by the stench of rotting flesh. Horses refused to move, the birds had vanished, and through the morning mist he saw them hundreds of pale, lifeless bodies skewered on tall wooden stakes. Some were fresh, some were still twitching, some had been there so long they had fused into skeletons fused into the sky itself. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a message. And the man sending that message was Vlad III, the Prince of Wallachia, known to history as Vlad the Impaler. This is not just the tale of a tyrant. It's the anatomy of calculated fear, a study in how one man took cruelty and refined it into a tool sharper than any sword. Vlad didn't kill to silence his enemies. He killed to make them talk, to whisper his name in fear in courts, in barracks across kingdoms. And it worked. Forget the cartoonish vampire in a cape. The real Vlad was something far more terrifying, a man who turned justice into theater punishment, into performance, and torture into a political philosophy. He didn't crave blood. He craved obedience. So who was he really? A madman? A patriot, or a cold strategist who understood human psychology better than any ruler before him? To find out, we have to go back, not to the myth, but to the boy held hostage in a foreign land, the son of a betrayed father, the seed of terror planted in a cradle of betrayal. Because before there were forests of the impaled, there was just one child, watching, learning. Before Vlad became the scourge of Eastern Europe, he was a hostage. At just 11 years old, he and his younger brother Radu were taken by the Ottomans not as prisoners of war, but as political insurance. This was standard practice at the time. Christian princes sent their sons to the court of the Sultan as a guarantee of loyalty, but what those boys witnessed inside the palaces of Edirne was anything but standard. Vlad didn't just live among his captors, he studied them. He watched how disobedience was handled not with trials or negotiations, but with swift theatrical brutality. A thief didn't simply lose a hand, he lost it in front of a crowd. A rebel wasn't just executed, he was displayed. The Ottomans understood something fundamental: violence, when performed correctly, is not just punishment, it's persuasion. Vlad absorbed this lesson like scripture. His brother Radu adapted differently. Handsome, charming, more pliable Radu converted to Islam and found favor in the Ottoman court. But Vlad, rigid, watchful, seething, refused to bend. His time in Ottoman captivity didn't break him. It shaped him. It taught him that mercy is weakness, that fear is currency, and that survival depends not on alliances but on dominance. When he eventually returned to Wallachia, Vlad was not the same boy who had left. He was now fluent in his enemy's methods, armed with a vision more terrifying than any sword, a country where fear ruled more effectively than any army. When Vlad returned home, he came not as a hero, but as a ghost of a broken legacy. His father, Vlad II Dracula, had once ruled Wallachia under impossible pressures, trying to balance loyalty between the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary. That balancing act proved fatal. The Wallachian boyars, nobles drunk on intrigue and self-preservation, turned on him. Vlad Dracula was assassinated. His eldest son, Mircea, was captured, blinded with hot irons, and buried alive. And where was young Vlad in Ottoman chains, learning the art of power, while his family was erased back home? By the time Vlad regained his freedom, he wasn't just returning to a homeland, he was returning to a graveyard. The throne of Wallachia was now a blood-stained chair passed between puppets, each one more disposable than the last. The nobles who killed his father still controlled the land, their hands clean, but their eyes nervous. They had no idea what kind of man was about to reclaim the throne. This wasn't about justice for Vlad. It was about vengeance, yes, but more than that, it was about control. Never again would he allow loyalty to be a matter of choice. He had learned the hard way: alliances crumble, treaties are broken, but fear endures. And so the boy who had once been powerless returned with a singular mission: to build a kingdom not on trust, but on terror, starting with the very people who thought they had destroyed him. Spring 1459. It was Easter Sunday in Targoviste, the Wallachian capital. The city was dressed for celebration. Wine-flowed choirs sang, and noble families gathered at the royal court in their finest clothes, ready to feast with their newly reinstated prince. They thought they were being honored. They thought Vlad was making peace. They had no idea they were about to be erased. Vlad welcomed them warmly, toasted their health, and spoke eloquently of unity and tradition. And then, as the last course was served, he gave the signal. The doors were sealed. His guards stormed in. The elderly nobles were dragged from the hall and impaled immediately, his version of a party favor. But Vlad wasn't done. The younger nobles and their families were not killed. No, he had plans for them. They were forced to march still in their ornate clothing across treacherous mountain paths to the ruins of a fortress high in the Carpathians. There they became laborers, rebuilding what would become Castle Poenary Vlad's future stronghold. Noble sons and daughters hauled stone and timber until their hands bled. Some died of exhaustion. Others froze to death. Their bodies were not buried. They were added into the mortar mixed with lime and stone, literally becoming part of the walls. This was not just revenge. It was symbolism made real. Vlad was telling the world, the old Wallachia is gone. The blood of traitors will now hold up my throne. The boyars, who had once shaped kings, were now decorations, silent, suffering bricks in a fortress of fear. To understand Vlad's reign, you have to let go of modern notions of execution. For him, death was never the point. Suffering was. And nothing embodied this philosophy more than his signature method, impalement. But this wasn't the clumsy, brutal killing you might imagine. Under Vlad, impalement became an exact science. Stakes were deliberately blunt, not sharp. Why? Because a sharp point killed too quickly. Vlad wanted his victims to feel every inch of wood sliding through their body. The stake would enter the rectum or vagina and be carefully guided, missing vital organs on purpose to extend the agony. Once upright gravity did the rest. Victims could live for hours, even days, impaled and conscious, slowly sliding downward as the stake tore through their bodies. And it wasn't done in secret. Vlad arranged these human stakes in patterns, circles, rows, forests. Whole hillsides became galleries of the dying. Merchants would come upon valleys where the smell hit first, then the buzzing of flies, and finally the image hundreds, sometimes thousands of men, women, and even children skewered like meat, their mouths frozen in silent screams. To Vlad, this was more than punishment. It was warning, a message written in blood and bone. Foreign envoys were spared the stake but not the sight. Diplomats returned home with stories so vivid and horrifying they bordered on madness. They spoke of landscapes where even the crows refused to land. And that was the point. Vlad didn't need armies everywhere. He didn't need spies. His reputation marched ahead of him, clearing the road with terror. Where others built walls, Vlad built nightmares. In 1462, Vlad faced the impossible, a full-scale invasion by the Ottoman Empire led by Sultan Mehmed II, the very conqueror of Constantinople. Most rulers would fortify their cities, beg for allies, or sue for peace. Vlad, he burned everything. This was not a defensive war, it was a performance. As the Ottoman army advanced into Wallachia, they found villages eerily untouched until they looked closer. What appeared from a distance to be ordinary settlements revealed up close hundreds of impaled bodies arranged like crops in a grotesque harvest. Wells were poisoned not just with toxins, but with the corpses of the dead. Food stores had been replaced with rotting limbs. Every river they crossed carried blood. Then came the centerpiece. Near Targovishte, Sultan Mehmed's army stopped dead at the sight of it. 20,000 impaled prisoners lined in concentric circles. Soldiers, merchants, diplomats, even children. The smell was unbearable. The silence even worse. Mehmed, no stranger to brutality, was shaken. According to chroniclers, the Sultan looked upon the field of death and muttered, "It is not possible to war with a man who does such things." The invasion faltered. The Ottoman lines slowed. Some soldiers deserted. Others refused to sleep without a sword in hand. The fear was so complete it crippled an empire that had once shattered the walls of Byzantium. And Vlad, he watched it unfold just as he had planned. He didn't need to win a battle. He only needed to win the mind. In a world ruled by iron and flame, Vlad had discovered a deeper weapon: imagination. If you thought Vlad's cruelty was reserved for rebels and soldiers, think again. Even ambassadors protected by centuries of diplomatic custom were not safe. In one of his most infamous acts, Vlad received a delegation of Ottoman envoys. These were not mere messengers. They represented Sultan Mehmed himself, arriving with demands for increased tribute and political submission. The meeting began with tense formality. Then came the issue of respect. The Ottomans, following Islamic custom, refused to remove their turbans before the prince. Vlad nodded politely. "Very well," he said. "Then let them never be removed again." At his command, guards seized the envoys and nailed the turbans to their skulls, hammering iron spikes through cloth, flesh, and bone. Blood ran down their faces. Screams echoed in the hall. But it didn't end there. The envoys, now impaled with their religious headgear fused to their heads, were executed in full view of Vlad's court. Their bodies were displayed along the main trade road toward Ottoman territory. It was his idea of a message. To murder an ambassador was political suicide. It violated every standard of international law, even in the lawless 15th century. But Vlad didn't care. He didn't believe in customs or immunity. He believed in fear. The Ottomans understood. This was no longer a border dispute, it was personal. And that was exactly what Vlad wanted, because a personal enemy is more vulnerable. They react, not calculate. And in reacting, they step into traps they never see coming. For Vlad, even diplomacy was just another theater for horror. After the diplomatic bloodbath, Vlad knew retaliation would come, and it did. The Ottomans poured across the Danube, determined to destroy the madman who'd humiliated them. But what they found wasn't a war, it was a waking nightmare. Vlad didn't wait behind castle walls. Instead, he turned his entire country into a death trap. He ordered wells poisoned not with herbs or arsenic, but with corpses sometimes still twitching. Granaries were packed not with grain, but with hacked limbs. Trees bore strange fruits. Human heads hung like rotten apples. The deeper the Ottomans pushed, the more surreal the terrain became. Every night they advanced through silence, and every morning they found more of their comrades impaled, moaning, or already dead. The cries echoed down mountain valleys. The smell clung to their armor. Then came Vlad's boldest move. In a moonless raid, his forces slipped into the Ottoman camp itself, targeting not the barracks or the horses, but the Sultan's own tent. The assassination failed, but the message landed: nowhere was safe. Not even the commander of the greatest army in Europe could sleep without a blade at his throat. The Ottomans staggered. They couldn't fight what they couldn't see. Supplies ran thin. Morale collapsed. Soldiers begged to go home. The most powerful war machine of the 15th century was being dismantled not with swords, but with imagination, stagecraft, and raw fear. This wasn't just unconventional warfare, it was performance art. And Vlad was the director, his stage lit by torches, his actors dying by the thousands. To understand Vlad, you have to accept a chilling truth: he didn't just use cruelty, he enjoyed it. There are countless accounts of him dining among impaled victims, seated calmly at a banquet table, while men, women, and children writhed on stakes around him. Witnesses say he would raise a goblet of wine and toast their suffering. He commented on their facial expressions, criticized the executioners if a stake was placed poorly, even offered sarcastic encouragement to the dying. One ambassador from Hungary, invited to dinner at Castle Poenari, found himself seated by a window overlooking a fresh garden of the impaled. When he turned pale at the smell, Vlad smiled. "Would you like to be placed higher up," he asked, "where the air is fresher?" The ambassador forced a laugh. He didn't touch his food. This was Vlad's genius. He didn't need to kill you to destroy you. Witnesses became weapons. Survivors returned home with tales so vivid, so grotesque, that they did more damage than any siege engine. Vlad was conducting a psychological symphony, and everyone who saw him became part of the chorus. Terror wasn't a side effect. It was the product, a tool to prevent wars by making the cost of confrontation too high to consider. He didn't rule with policy. He ruled with nightmares. Because once you saw what he could do, once you smelled that blood, heard those screams, you never truly left Wallachia. Not really.